His wallet always holds a note that reads, "A delay is better than a disaster." But on this day, as he piloted the passenger jet and just left the airport, he encountered a collision with a flock of birds. The engine instantly caught fire and failed. More importantly, both engines were not spared. The captain was not aware of the status of the engine at this time, only feeling a sharp drop in thrust. Every step of his operation next was related to the lives of 155 passengers. The captain tried to relight the engine but received no feedback. Immediately, the cabin lost power. The captain didn't hesitate to turn on the auxiliary power unit, and the cabin returned to normal. The flight attendants signaled everyone not to panic. Everyone thought they just encountered air turbulence, but they didn't know that in the cockpit, the captain was racing against death. The captain called the control tower for help. The control tower ordered all planes to stop flying immediately, clear the runway, and assist Flight 1549 to return. But Sally knew that at the current altitude of the plane, they were beyond hope. In this way, the plane landed on the Hudson River at an absolutely perfect angle. There was no disintegration or capsizing. The plane glided for a distance and stopped smoothly in the middle of the river. But a more dangerous test was coming. Sally hurried to the cabin and Zero told all passengers to put on life jackets and evacuate quickly and orderly. The river water rushed in instantly, and the water level soon reached the portholes. The plane could sink at any time. The co-pilot was still in a state of shock. The flight attendant couldn't care less about the leg injury and immediately devoted herself to the evacuation. The front door opened, the life raft popped open smoothly, and the emergency exits on both sides were opened. Passengers stood on the wings and waited for rescue. Some people directly jumped into the river and wanted to swim to the other side of the river. But he forgot that it was winter in New York, with a temperature of only around 0 degrees. Sally reminded them to put on life jackets while taking out blankets and giving them to the elderly and children to ensure that people had a chance of survival in the low temperature. Fortunately, the nearby Coast Guard noticed them, and air rescue was also on the way. The passengers were successfully evacuated from the cabin. The ships that received the news rushed here from all sides. The patrol team pulled up smoothly beside the wing, and the passengers were pulled onto the boat one after another. The pilots jumped into the icy water without hesitation to rescue the warrior who was swimming alone. Another 300 citizens who heard the news also joined the rescue. Everyone joined in an orderly manner. People seemed to forget that this was an air crash with a very low survival rate. Before returning to the cockpit to take the accident record and finally escape to the life raft. With the joint efforts of people, the rescue was over in just 20 minutes. The first thing Sally did after being rescued was to report to his wife that he was safe, but he still felt uneasy. The mayor and police chief wanted to greet him, but Sally only cared about one number, which was 155. He needed to confirm that all the people on the plane had been rescued. However, in the current situation, it was impossible to count the number of people. With the strong suggestion of the co-pilot, Sally was taken to the hospital for a checkup. At this moment, the union president brought a message.
Got it again? 155. 155. It's official. 155.
At this moment, the boulder pressed on Sally's heart was finally shaken, and the resulting joy and relief, mixed with all kinds of surprises, eventually turned into a sigh of relief. He created a miracle. News reports came in a flood. Sally became a hero in people's hearts. The National Transportation Safety Board invited him to attend a hearing, but Sally never dreamed that this meeting would become his trial. A joint investigation team was set up by multiple departments to investigate the crash. The Transportation Bureau's engineer calculated that under the current conditions, the plane had enough time to return and did not need to take the risk of a water landing. Before giving Sally a chance to refute, they raised another question. How did Sally calculate all the parameters and come to the conclusion that the plane could not land?
You eyeballed.
The Transportation Bureau ignored Sally's judgment, not to mention that the double-engine shutdown caused by the flock of birds was a completely unprecedented accident. No matter how Sally explained, the Transportation Bureau still pressed hard, and even raised doubts about Sally's mental state.
When was your last drink, Captain Sullenberger?
9 days ago.
Drugs?
No, never.
First Officer Skiles?
Don't drink. Never have.
Sally saved the lives of 155 fresh people, but had to endure the embarrassment of being unable to defend himself. Fortunately, in society, it is all praise for him. Taxi drivers feel honored to carry him, and even before the interview, the makeup artist can't help but give him a kiss and introduce him to his single mother.
Well, tell Brenda thank you, but I've got a girl at home.
Lucky woman.
Sally felt a little comforted, but he still had to face the cold reality. Just at the beginning of the second meeting, the Transportation Bureau pointed out that the aircraft data showed that the left engine still had thrust and remained in operation throughout the entire flight. That means that the double-engine shutdown was Sally's misjudgment. Combined with the wind speed and altitude at that time and many other factors, it is enough to prove that the plane can land at the airport safely. The co-pilot was tired of the faces of these people. A group of people sitting in the office. Why question the savior of more than 100 families? Without Sally, it would be a terrible air crash. But the Transportation Bureau immediately presented the evidence. Engineers conducted 20 computer simulation tests, and all the parameters were the same as those of Flight 1549 when the accident occurred, but the test results were all the same, and the plane could return successfully.
Successful?
The plane landed at LaGuardia. Intact.
Undamaged.
Sally couldn't believe it. He wanted to study the aircraft parameter report, but was told that during the investigation, all data were confidential to prevent excessive coverage by some media. When the complete cockpit communication record is loaded, they will face the final trial. Sally felt something was wrong. This was completely different from his memory. The obvious feeling in the cockpit was the dual-engine shutdown. If he had chosen to return to the airport, the plane would likely have dived into the center of New York City, causing a major disaster. It seems that in order to find out the truth, only by waiting for the left wing to be salvaged, although the co-pilot had complete faith in Sally, the catastrophe he had just experienced, and the various difficulties from the Transportation Bureau, made Sally fall into the quagmire of self-doubt. Even he had nightmares every night. If the water landing is proven to be the wrong choice, then Sally's career will be over. He will have no pension, be unable to pay the rent, and have nowhere to live. In the past 42 years, he has carried millions of passengers. In the end, he will be judged by these 208 seconds. Sally stood in front of the window in a daze. The successive nightmares made him have hallucinations. Anxious emotions drowned him. He tried to shift his attention through exercise. However, the dawn in the sky could not ease his restlessness. His confidence also shook. If it really was his misjudgment, would the media, who didn't hesitate to praise him, also change their attitudes immediately and accuse him of being a pretentious liar?
Sully Sullenberger, are you a hero or a fraud?
The huge pressure made it hard for him to sleep. He ran on the neon-lit streets of New York and unexpectedly came to the airport nearby. Looking at the fighter planes parked in the night, Sally thought of his younger self. He embraced the vast sky since he was a child. The coach told him that a qualified pilot is constantly learning throughout his life and discovering the truth. Kept in mind the coach's teachings, and later became an Air Force. During a training trip, the fighter jet he was driving suddenly malfunctioned. The tower told him that he could eject and escape at any time, but Sally believed that he could land safely. He increased his speed to keep straight. Flight 9 and 3 put down the landing gear in advance to make sure nothing went wrong. Under Sally's perfect control, the plane landed safely on the runway. If it were someone else, ejection and escape might be the best option. Sally's love for flying ran through his life. Rich experience made Sally the captain he is now. Sometimes faith is just faith. It can't change our life or get us out of all the shackles in the world, but it has a reassuring power. Sally came to a bar, wanting to escape the stifling reality with alcohol. The news of the water landing was played on TV in a loop. The boss recognized Sally and invited him to drink for free. He also took out vodka named after him. The customers greeted him enthusiastically. They all think Sally is a worthy hero. At this moment, Sally heard a word on TV timing. He instantly thought of something. After paying the bill, Sally immediately called a friend from the union and begged him to do him a favor. He hoped to reschedule the simulation flight test until before the hearing. Sally believed that real people were completely different from computers, and the outcome would be very different. He would definitely find a way to prove himself. If the result goes against his speculation, he will take off his flight badge on his own initiative.
It's all about the timing, Larry. You can accomplish anything if you're never in a hurry.
I sure as hell agree with that.
Can you make it happen?
I'll try. It's a lot of phone calls.
Sally needs to do now is to go back to the hotel and wait for the message, but unexpectedly, he received an unrestrained hug from a stranger. She expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Sally. The final hearing came as scheduled. His wife also called at this time. She had once doubted Sally, even putting all the pressure on Sally because of the rent. She never considered the problem from his perspective, but now the wife really realizes that Sally is also one of the 155 people. She almost lost her lover forever.
Yeah, but you didn't. I'm right here.
How are you holding up? I'm holding up. Please tell me this is almost over.
It's almost over.
I love you.
I love you too.
A heartfelt hug, and understanding encouragement, and the affirmation of those strangers supported Sally to regain confidence. This time he wanted to be his own hero. His union friends didn't let him down either. Sally was able to see the simulation test via satellite as he wished. The computer replicated all the parameters and conditions of the day. The simulation began. The flock of birds hit, and both engines stopped. The two experienced pilots immediately made a decision, and decisively controlled the simulated plane to return. The plane successfully landed on the runway of LaGuardia Airport, and the simulation results of the other group were the same, both airports and multiple runways. The simulated Flight 1549 could land successfully. The current situation is very unfavorable to Sally. In order to arrange for today's demonstration, the Transportation Bureau has spent a lot of manpower and material resources. However, there is no difference between the real person simulation and the computer simulation. They don't understand Sally's purpose in doing this. But Sally found a breakthrough. Everyone ignored the most important point, that is, the human factor. Whether it is a computer or a real person simulation, they can react immediately after the accident occurs and return to the airport along the pre-practiced heading. But no one told Sally at that time. It was the lowest altitude two-way engine shutdown in history. 155 lives were in his hands. No one has received such emergency training. Anyone needs time to make a judgment.
You are looking for human error. Then make it human.
This wasn't a video game. It was life and death.
Sally's statement is well-founded, and he raised another question.
Please ask how many practice runs they had.
17.
17.
The pilot who landed at Teterboro had 17 practice attempts. before the simulation we just witnessed.
They even tried to use 17 mistakes in exchange for the success of the simulation. The trial only has zero margin for error in reality.
The reaction decision time will be set at 35 seconds.
In this way, Sally won himself 35 seconds of reaction time. The second simulation test began. The flock of birds hit, and both engines stopped. Add 35 seconds of waiting time. The pilot controls the return flight. However, this time, the pilot was powerless to
too low, terrain. 50, 40, 30, 20.
no matter how they saved it. Flight 1549 could only crash into the building in the end. Both simulations ended in failure. The atmosphere on the scene changed. This seemed to be within Sally's expectation. The Transportation Bureau lost its arrogance. Next is the recording extracted from the black box. Everyone was taken to the scene of the air crash. Flight 1549 had just left the airport for 2 minutes when it was hit by a flock of Canada geese.
Birds.
The altitude at that time had only climbed 895 meters. The flock was sucked into both engines, causing both engines to shut down. Sally noticed that both engines had stopped working. He tried to reignite them, but there was no response. Sally skipped the steps of the quick check manual and immediately started the auxiliary power unit. The plane gained thrust and avoided a stall and free fall. He took control from the co-pilot, asked the co-pilot to take out the manual, and look for a solution to the dual engine shutdown. At the same time, Sally urgently contacted the tower air traffic controller, explained the situation, and requested a return. The air traffic controller also reacted quickly, immediately giving the turn-in heading. Sally adjusted the plane along the route provided by the air traffic controller. The co-pilot found the solution in the manual, but Sally had already completed the steps in advance. The air traffic controller too
low, terrain. Too low, terrain.
Sally had to make a choice. He gave the final announcement.
This is the captain. Brace for impact.